Hey eBay sellers, it's Suzanne A. Wells, and we are on video number 104 and starting a new playlist for selling vintage items on eBay. So, the first item we're going to talk about is flip clock radios. And if you were alive in the 80s, 70s, you may have had one of these in your house somewhere. I had one in my room, and every morning it woke me up to get ready for school. So when you see these in movies, we kind of have a little flashback there to our uh, days in the 80s. But I found this tech forum here that's talking about the digital, they call them digital mechanical alarm clocks, and it's actually a flip mechanism inside that this guy describes it pretty good. It's a big stack of numbers like a Rolodex that flip over as the drum rotates, displaying numerals. So basically, all these the numbers are on a spool inside the clock radio, and it just you could hear it flipping every time, every minute as the time would change. So it actually had a sound that you could hear, and you dreaded that sound in the morning when it would flip, and then your alarm would come on. And in the movie Groundhog Day, you see Bill Murray there just every day as he wakes up to the same day again. This is the clock that he's smashing and hating, and it says in the movie here that it appears to be the Panasonic model RC6030, but in white. So those are actually the ones that sell for the most on eBay because this movie has made them a collector's item, but the other ones do well too. So if you ever see them at a estate sale or thrift store, look up the brand and the model number because they do vary in prices. But so let's go over to eBay and we can see these are the completed listings. There's only 305, so that's what we're going to get into with vintage items. There's just not as much of these items anymore because they're no longer made. They are truly limited in quantity, and as time goes by, prices will go up. So, for example, this first one here it's actually got Groundhog Day in the title, and it's sold for $480. And it looks like the same person here. The pictures are almost the same. The shadows are a little bit different. So I almost wonder if the first one got returned and he sold it again, or what's happening there. Oh, it is the same seller. Yeah, the names are the same. So I don't know about that. But $222 for this sale back in February. Also, Back to the Future, same situation. When Michael J. Fox is the actor in that movie, and he's got one of these flip clocks. It's the Panasonic RC6015, so a little bit different model, but that one also is a collector's item because it was in that movie. So if you go down to other brands, you can see that they do sell for over $100 in some cases. It just depends on which one you have. But this is something that is truly vintage, and people in the 80s liked these. And sometimes when people don't really embrace new technology, they don't want to use their iPhone with an alarm on it. They want a regular clock. So some people actually use these because they like them. So I have found a few of these over the years. I think sold for up to around $40 because they weren't the super collectible kind, but still made money on them. And I do want to tell you a little story about one that I bought and who it was connected to, because you just never know when you go to an estate sale or a garage sale who the people are and their history. And so I went to a neighborhood garage sale in a subdivision called the Polo Fields, north of Atlanta. And this is a pretty affluent subdivision. My dad actually lives in there, and so we went up there and made the rounds, and shopped at different houses and that kind of thing. So I get to this one house, and it was this family that was doing an estate sale. The mom was probably late 70s, 80 years old, and they were going to let her go live at senior living, and the grown children were running the estate sale, and they were just having a good time with it. And so I found one of these clocks in a box, and they didn't have a price on it. So I was talking to the daughter, and I was like, well, how much for this clock? And she's like, I don't know, $2. I'm like, okay. And I said, well, does it work? And she's like, I don't know. And we couldn't find a plug in the garage, so I went into the house with her, into the kitchen, and plugged it up, and it worked just fine and everything. And she was telling me, yeah, we've had this clock forever. You know, when I went to high school, my mom would always have this on in the kitchen, and we talked about the Atlanta radio stations that we'd listen to and the wake-up shows and the personalities and all that stuff, because I am pretty much a native Atlantan also. And so we had a good conversation about that. And so I bought the clock and went on my way. And then I was telling my dad about it, about where I had bought certain things at the sale, and he was like, "Oh, that's the McDonald's house." And I'm like, "Well, okay, do I know them?" And he said, "Yeah, that's Larry McDonald's widow." And I was like, "Who is Larry McDonald?" And if you were around in the 80s and paid attention to the news, he was in politics, and he was Democratic, very conservative, and he was actually on the flight that was the Korean flight that was shot down over by the Soviet Union. And if you're not familiar with that story, I'll just tell you real quick. September 1st, 1983, Korean Airlines Flight 007 was on the last leg of a flight from New York City to Seoul, Korea, with a stopover in Anchorage, Alaska. As it approached its final destination, the plane began to veer far off its normal course. In just a short time, the plane flew into Russian airspace and crossed over the Kamchatka Peninsula, I don't know how to pronounce that, where some top-secret Soviet military installations were known to be located. The Soviets sent 2 fighters to intercept the plane. According to tapes of the conversation between the fighter pilots and Soviet ground control, the fighters quickly located the KAL flight and tried to make contact with the passenger jet. Failing to receive a response, one of the fighters fired a heat-seeking missile. The KAL 007 was hit and plummeted into the Sea of Japan. All 269 people on board were killed. So the owner of this clock was this man who was on this very famous plane crash, and this was all over the news in Atlanta as well as national news. This was a huge thing. So I didn't even know who I was talking to when this happened. And then here we are on, I think this is people.com, where it talks about Larry McDonald and who he was, and ultra-conservative John Birch Society, on and on. So I'm only giving you this history lesson. Some of you probably have no interest in this, but you just never know when you're at these estate sales and garage sales who owned these things that you're buying. And I actually just sold the clock just like any other normal item. I didn't keep it as a historical item, but it is very interesting. If you can find out the history behind some of these things that you're buying, you may be able to work that into the story of your item when you list it for sale. And a good story does sell things, so you don't want to make these things up. But if something has a great story behind it, it doesn't hurt to give that information when you're selling an item on eBay. But so anyway, that was just an interesting situation, and I didn't even know who I was interacting with, but a very famous person and situation in American history. As a matter of fact, this first article I showed you is actually on history.com. So anyway, just be curious when you're buying things, and chat with people, and you just never know what you might end up with. So digital, mechanical, alarm clocks, flip clock radios, look for those when you are out sourcing for eBay. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye.